It's Tim Sheesy for TechSpot, and this is the LG G3, the company's flagship smartphone for 2014 that comes with a brand new 5.5-inch Quad HD display powered by a Snapdragon 801 SoC inside. It runs Android 4.4 out of the box with LG's custom skin atop. It also has a 3000 mAh removable battery, 32 GB of internal storage, LTE and the usual connectivity features, plus up to 3 GB of RAM. In the United States, this device retails for around about $650 unlocked and outright, but you typically find it for $99 on contract. Big thanks to MobiCity.com for sending out the LG G3 for me to review today. If you want the latest smartphones as quickly as possible, they have a great range of unlocked and outright products. Also, specifically for TechSpot readers, you can enter the code TechSpot into the checkout to get $10 off any order over the price of $50. So big props to MobiCity for providing us with that discount, and also the LG G3 for this review. So let's take a closer look at the LG G3, and first you'll notice that it's quite a large smartphone, of course because of that 5.5-inch display, but it's not significantly larger than some of the other flagship smartphones that we've seen throughout 2014. Most of that can be attributed to the thin bezel that you'll find around the edges of the display. There's around about 76% display coverage on this device, which makes it quite good. Compare that to one of the phones that I've been looking at recently in the Sony Xperia Z2, and you notice that 5.2-inch display is a little bit smaller, but overall the two devices are actually pretty similar in terms of its size. The LG G3 is just slightly, ever so slightly wider. So despite the 5.5-inch display, the G3 is still a very compact device as far as these sort of phones go. In fact, taking a look here as well at the HTC Desire 816, which was my last smartphone review, this device here has a 5.5-inch display. It's actually dead at the moment, but you'll see there that the Desire 816 is much larger than the G3. Both of these devices have 5.5-inch displays. Looking at the actual design of the G3, and there's very similar design cues to last year's G2 in that the buttons are found on the back of the handset just below the camera here. So we've got the power button in the center as well as the volume rocker. It's quite an interesting position for a button on a smartphone. Most of the time we see it on the sides, but this time it is on the back. And to be honest, I don't have much of a problem with this. It can be kind of tricky to reach around the back there and press the button to turn it on and off, or to manipulate the volume buttons, but once you get used to it, you'll find that you'll be pressing the back buttons just as you would be pressing the side buttons on any other smartphone. The reason why you'll find the buttons on the back of the smartphone instead of the sides is because the bezel on the side of this display here is actually too slim to fit the button hardware inside, and they figure that the buttons on the back are fairly easy to use. Plus, combined with a few software optimizations, you'll find that it's not even that bad to have the buttons on the back if you were thinking that it might be a little bit awkward. Also, along the back of the display, you'll find the laser autofocus system left of the main 13-megapixel camera, and there's a dual LED flash as well. And on the bottom there, you'll find the rear-facing speaker. Around the edges of the device, you'll find the 3.5mm headphone jack, a microphone, and the micro USB port on the bottom. On the top, flicking it up here, you'll find the infrared LED as well as another microphone. There's nothing on the sides of this device due to the bezel issue that I mentioned before. Up the top is a notification LED, the front-facing camera, and of course the in-call speaker. And towards the button, you'll find on-screen navigation buttons as well as this pane for LG branding. The way the body of the LG G3 curves makes it quite ergonomic. Some people think this device might be a little bit too large for them, but I find that it fits quite comfortably in your hands. Unfortunately though, the back panel is made of what LG calls a metallic skin, so you can see it reflecting there in the light with a sort of metallic pattern going up and down, but you'll actually discover that this panel is entirely made of plastic, which is a little bit disappointing as it doesn't have those same metal qualities as the HTC One M8, which does in fact use real metal. That said, the back panel is entirely removable. As you can see there, you can open up the panel, take it off, and you do reveal the removable battery, 3000 mAh, as well as the micro SD and micro SIM card slots right there. So the removable battery will of course be a feature that some of you will find particularly handy. I never find a reason to remove the battery, but that said, the feature is in there if you so need it. Obviously, one of the major talking points about the G3 is its new 5.5-inch Quad HD IPS LCD display, so we're talking about a 2560 by 1440 resolution with a pixel density over 500 ppi, which gives it a fantastic crispness and clarity that you simply don't get from 1080p panels. While the difference going from a 720p to a 1080p panel is certainly noticeable, I don't think there's as much difference going from a 1080p panel to this 1440p panel. It definitely is a little bit crisper, but I think generally if you're not doing a direct side-by-side comparison, that you'll even notice the differences in resolution. And certainly if you're an end user that doesn't know the nuances of each display and isn't familiar with display technology, I think you'll find it particularly difficult to discern the difference going 1080p to 1440p. But that said, the display does look fantastic in certain situations. Looking at text is very crisp, and photos as well. That said, we will do a direct comparison between the 1440p panel on the LG G3 and the 1080p panel on the HTC One M8. You notice that despite the 1080p panel having a very good pixel density, the LG G3 does beat it out slightly in some of those common icons that you can see on the display, such as the Feedly icon, Facebook and the Gmail icon. You notice that they are sharper on the G3's display. That said, if you saw each one of these panels separately, I think you'll find it very difficult to say which one had the higher resolution without knowing beforehand. And if you look at some of the common applications here, again, the G3's display does beat out the One M8 very so slightly in that resolution department. Overall, I think you'll find that the two displays are very similar, especially in color quality, where you notice that the HTC One M8 is a little bit whiter than the G3, and that's because the backlight in the One M8's display is a little bit better. Here we're just taking a look at the LG G3's display in terms of color quality and saturation. Generally speaking, I don't think there's anything to complain about here. It delivers very good results that hold its own against the One M8, Xperia Z2 and Galaxy S5. It's not quite as balanced as the Nexus 5 or G2, which have near perfect color gamuts, but I think you'll find this display to be perfectly adequate for your general viewing experiences, especially paired with that Quad HD display. Next up is performance, and there's nothing to complain about as far as how the G3 performs on a day-to-day basis. Browsing around the operating system, loading apps and doing things like that is very speedy despite the Quad HD resolution, and that's mostly because the G3's Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 SoC is more than capable of running the operating system. You notice here that it's powered by a 2.46 GHz Crate 400 CPU, the Adreno 330 GPU, and if you get the 32GB model, you'll find it has 3GB of RAM. The 16GB model has 2GB. Quite an odd arrangement there, but generally speaking, I think that you won't notice the difference between 2GB and 3GB of RAM. You see that loading apps and doing things like that is extremely speedy. If we load up the browser here, we can load up things remarkably quickly. Of course, it has LTE and Wi-Fi 802.11 AC in here. So you know, browsing and things like that, there's generally no performance complaints to speak of. It's a bit of a different story when it comes to gaming. The Quad HD display does have a performance hit when it comes to running 3D titles. It's around about 32% when I was looking at my benchmarks. And in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, we're running here on nearly maximum settings, and it does struggle a little bit with running it at 2560 by 1440, whereas it was generally pretty smooth on a 1080p display. So just be wary of that slight performance hit that you'll get from the Quad HD display. There's an even bigger hit when it comes to battery life. The G2 was a very strong performer when it comes to battery life, but unfortunately, you don't get that same battery performance from the G3. Of course, you can check out benchmarks of this device on TechSpot.com in the full written review. Now it's time to take a look at the software on the LG G3, and there's definitely a lot to get through. The skin that they've applied to Android 4.4 is packed full of features, and it has a simpler interface that looks much nicer than what they dished up on the G2, as you can see here. A lot of the application icons look much nicer, much cleaner, and much more modern than the childish and amateurish interface that they dished up on the G2. A lot of the applications, the stock Android applications, also look much nicer and much more in line with stock Android. Stock Android still looks a little bit better than this interface, but as I browse through some of the applications here, you'll see that cleaner and clearer interface that they've gone to on some of these applications, which generally speaking, I do approve of. LG has gone with a 5x5 home screen grid on the G3, that is to go with a 5.5-inch display. There's also a 5 icon dock thing at the bottom there with the application drawer right in the middle. The notification pull down is quite similar to what was on the G2 in that you get some quick sliders here for brightness as well as sound. And there at the top, you notice that there's a range of your quick toggles and settings, easy to get to. You can simply click on that settings icon to dive right into the settings, all things that we have seen before on Android smartphones. Something new to the G3 though is Smart Notice, and that is found in this widget here at the top of the display. You'll notice here it gives you natural language notifications and updates for certain things such as the weather. For example, it's telling me that later at night I should take an umbrella when I leave the house, and some of this information can be quite useful. You also find things such as performance updates for some applications as well as missed call notifications, all in that Smart Notice thing. It is very similar to Google Now, which you get of course by going into the Google application there, but it's right on the home screen, which I find very useful. To the left of the home screen here, you'll find Smart Bulletin. This is LG's way to give you some information on the LG Health application, which I won't go to in great detail. It's a pretty basic health app. But when you start stepping and going through your daily exercises, it will appear here. Alongside this interesting pane for smart tips. I'm not really sure why they've included smart tips here, because you should know all the features of your smartphone after a few months of use. Luckily, you can disable this smart tips area or the pane as an entirety in the device's settings. Diving into the applications on the G3, and there's a few interesting ones that LG has included, notably Quick Memo, which is similar to S Note on the Galaxy series, in that you can input text and all sorts of things in here, as well as draw on the display when you need to annotate and things like that. In the notification pane, you'll also find this Quick Memo Plus button. Tap it and it takes a screenshot of the display, which you can simply start annotating and drawing on. If there's anything interesting that you find on there, simply click Save. You can save it into Quick Memo Plus, just like that. Very easy if you, for example, are looking at a map and you want to annotate where to go to, you can click on Quick Memo, draw a little circle, and you're into that straight away. Another thing you can find in the notification pane here is the Quick Remote feature. You simply tap that and a remote application will appear there, allowing you to control your TV using the IR LED on the top of the smartphone. There's also a full Quick Remote application in the settings, which allows you to do some of the simple features, including different rooms there if you so choose. Controlling your TVs is quite easy with that feature. It also has the feature to learn your remotes if it's not found in its standard database. Some of the multitasking features from the G2 have translated to the G3, including Q-Slide, which allows you to run applications such as the calculator over the top of any apps that you currently have in these floating windows. There's also the dual window feature. Hold down the back button and you can slide applications into either of the panes on the display like this. It loads two applications. You can simply drag up and drag down some of the application windows if you so want to use sort of a dual window feature like we've seen again on the Samsung Galaxy S5. So this is a very similar feature set between these two devices. Diving into the settings, and there are a few features to mention in here, including the ability to change the home touch buttons. Here you've got a button combination that you can simply add in a few things if you want. You can also rearrange the standard combination, putting back on the right hand side as opposed to the left if you want. Very handy if you want to pack more things into the navigation pane on the bottom down there. One of my favorite features on the G3 though is something called NOC Code, and this allows you to turn on and unlock the device with the display powered off. You don't have to reach back and press the power button, which is quite handy for some people that find that a little bit awkward. You see here the display is powered off, and like other smartphones you can double tap to turn on and get to the lock screen. However, if you tap in a certain combination or NOC code, as I do here, it'll unlock the display and turn it on in the one motion. Very, very handy. Of course, you can simply double tap on the display and enter your NOC code as well. This is another way to enter the LG G3, but I find that if the display is powered off, simply tapping in that NOC code once again is just a very easy way to turn on the device while keeping it secure. Another great feature on the G3 is the Smart Keyboard. You'll be using this all the time as your main method of inputting text, of course. But if you don't like the layout, which I tend to find quite good and easy to type on, simply head into the settings here, go into keyboard height and layout, and you have the ability to change a lot of these things, including the keyboard height. So if you prefer the larger keys, simply drag it up If you prefer smaller keys and more things on the display, simply drag it down. I prefer something in the middle ground, but this is very, very handy if you want a different keyboard height and to change the layout. It's all easy done in the LG keyboard. I just briefly want to touch on the camera of the LG G3. It's a 13 megapixel camera with optical image stabilization, and generally speaking, the photos you can get from this camera are very good. You can see some samples here where color quality is very good. Even in low light, you can get some surprisingly good shots. Sometimes when you're indoors, it's not as good as it is in strong lighting, but that said, most smartphones do struggle in these conditions, so the LG G3's performance here is nothing to be ashamed of. The camera overall isn't quite as good as the Galaxy S5, but it definitely holds its own, and that laser autofocus system makes it extremely quick to take photos. So I will give you a quick demonstration of the laser autofocus system. This is the default camera application where you simply tap anywhere on the display and it takes a photo and focuses on that location, although there are more settings that you can see there. The easiest thing with the laser autofocus system to see is that changing from focusing on the foreground to the background is extremely quick because it automatically knows what the distance is between the camera lens and the subject, all done by that laser autofocus system. So you see here I can focus on the foreground and switch to focusing on the background, and it's just so quick to simply tap in between those two things. It knows where the focus is on both of these points, and it does it as quick as a flash. A very, very good autofocus system on the LG G3 makes taking photos as quick as possible. Of course, there are other features in the G3's camera, such as 4K video recording. You can see there does Ultra HD. You can check out a sample of that as well as more still samples in the full review of the G3. And that brings me to the end of this review of the LG G3. There's a lot of things to like about this smartphone, including its compact design for a 5.5-inch display, including that ergonomic curved body. The back buttons are nothing to whinge about because you do have NOC Code, one of the fantastic features included in the capable software stack. The 5.5-inch display, while it isn't a huge upgrade on 1080p, does look very crisp and has good color quality. Performance around the operating system is very good, although there is a slight performance hit when it comes to rendering games on the Quad HD display. Battery life isn't so good, isn't as good as the G2, but it tends to hold its own against some of the other flagship smartphones. And the camera, 13 megapixels and optical image stabilization, is definitely a contender for the best smartphone camera of the year. So at the end of the day, you get yet another capable smartphone from LG that's packed with features. I think it's worth overlooking the performance and battery life deficit associated with the upgrade to the Quad HD display, because the features and hardware that LG has packed into this device certainly make it worth considering as your flagship smartphone for 2014. And that's it for this review of the LG G3. Big thanks to MobiCity.com for sending out this device for me to review today. If you want to get $10 off any order over $50, definitely enter the code TechSpot in the MobiCity.com checkout. Definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tech video reviews coming in the future, and you can follow us on Twitter at TechSpot for the latest tech news and content. Don't forget to like, comment, and favorite. Thanks guys, this has been a TechSpot video review.